Good morning. My name is Shonda, and here is my response to week one question. Democracy, what is it? Does it work with Islam? Is it a possibility? Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines democracy as government by the people, rule of the majority, government in which the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. The common people, especially when considering the source of political authority, the absence of hereditary or arbitrary class distinctions or privileges. Pretty cut and dry definition, pretty cut and dry idea. Many people construe democracy as completely ruled by the people, or that suffrage alone makes a democracy. I know I was under that same impression. Democracy is a simple concept, but the people do not directly rule, and it is not simply the right to vote. Citizens in a democracy have the right to choose their government representation. Their voices are heard with regard to the laws, policies, and general running of the country. Democracy provides the people with the ability to oust their leaders without the need of revolution, making those leaders accountable for their actions since they can be removed from their positions. I think this gives somewhat of a say, checks and balances for the leaders. We can ask questions of them. Why did they do this? Why did they not do that? And they have to answer. I mean, they have to be accountable for their actions. And if they can't give good answers and we're not happy with what they do, or, if people in a democratic nation are not happy with their leaders, those leaders can be removed from office. Other forms of government do not allow for either of these democratic privileges. These countries are sometimes stuck with the same rulers for decades or even longer, and even revolution doesn't really make a difference in leadership, so they really have no say. Democracy and Islam, does it work? Can it work together? When I first listened to the assignment before reading the required text, my initial thoughts were, of course not. How in the world would Islam and the Arab world in general accept and work with democracy? Sure, there are Arab nations that have held elections, but they're still far, far from democratic nations. And aren't the leadership regimes being voted in still somewhat tyrannical or fundamentalist, or just terribly strictly rooted in Islamic ways? I perceive the Arab nation, or I used to perceive the Arab nation and Arab region to be a region of people who were completely closed to outside influence of any kind and stuck in their own historical and religious past. However, through this week's reading assignment, I learned that this is not always the case. All Muslims are not fundamentalists, and in turn, all fundamentalists are not necessarily Muslims. The fundamentalists are the ones that come to mind most readily whenever you think of Muslim, or whenever I think of Muslim people. But most Muslims are religious by nature and are calm, peaceful people who are focused on peaceful outcomes to conflicts and peaceful actions during those conflicts. Their culture is deeply rooted in religion and history. They are not transfixed completely on waging war against the infidels and killing all Americans, as many of us are accustomed to believing. That, again, is the fundamentalist idea. Many Americans, again, myself included, are or were under the impression that all Muslims hate all Americans and everything that we stand for, that they want to destroy their enemies, which, of course, is us. We assume that the hatred presented in writings such as bin Laden's fatwa, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but where he, it's a call to every Muslim who believes in God to kill Americans and plunder their possessions and to launch attacks against the Allies. This is a common perception of us in that region, but the fact is bin Laden's declaration is seen as a grotesque example of fundamentalism, and it is not the shared opinion of the majority of Muslims. However, there does remain a significant number of hostile fundamentalist Muslims. It only takes a few terrorists to make a big noise, and it only takes a few terrorists to make that noise heard around the world. These Muslims, of course, would not be open to democracy, or these fundamentalists would not be open to democracy in any way, shape, or form. They're again too deeply rooted in religion and historical tradition. There is one law and one law only, and that's God's law. There's no man who has chosen to rule the people, and accepting the ideas and practices of the infidel is seen as a crime against God. Fundamentalists believe in a single Islamic polity, and that God is the sole sovereign and sole source of law. And it's not just the fundamentalists, but Muslims in general that believe that. And they believe that God is directly concerned with politics, and the leaders of the state are also the leaders of church, and vice versa. There is no separation. Religious leaders like the ulema, U-L-E-M-A, have the primary function of upholding and interpreting the holy law, not man's law, and historically the caliph led both religious and social life. Islam does not believe in the sense of government by priesthood. There are no priests or councils or leaders as there are in non-Muslim religions. So even their religion isn't like a hierarchy with someone overhead and then it kind of filters down. They just believe that God is the supreme ruler and the sovereign. Islam does not separate church and state. Religion and tradition dictate all aspects of life. Islamic beliefs and mandates provide the only universally accepted set of rules and principles for over 1,000 years. And the Muslim fundamentalists that we see as the overall Muslim thought process towards us or feel towards us would like to see Islam return to its former glory. The traditional fundamentalists believe that all who are not of Islamic belief are enemies of God and should be destroyed through jihad. Jihad typically means armed struggle against the enemy and fight. Those who call for jihad, such as bin Laden did, believe that God distinguishes those who fight above those who do not, and those who obey will receive a reward not only in this life but in the hereafter. They believe it's lawful to wage war against the infidels and apostates, and that it is even a religious obligation. These fundamentalist groups will continue with jihad until they are interrupted by truces, or until the entire world accepts the Muslim faith or submits to Muslim rule. So there will always be fundamentalists and there will always be jihad. The question is, will there always be enough to make their voices heard around the world? Will there always be enough to strike fear in the hearts of non-Muslim people and governments, or will these people evolve with time as modernized Muslims have? Only time will tell, but as stated before, it only takes a few to make a big noise, and it only takes a few to make that noise heard around the world. These fundamentalists probably will never work with democracy. Democracy would not work if they were a majority of the Islamic world. But on the flip side, as pointed out in this week's reading, most Muslims share basic cultural, moral, social, and political beliefs and aspirations with the United States and other westernized regions. Muslim culture's economics and diplomacy show a significant Western presence as well as a United States presence, which aids in the possibility of adopting democracy in that region. There are many Muslims, especially younger generations, who want nothing more than to be closer to the West and to the United States. They strive to develop democratic, free, economically thriving countries in their regions. They dream of countries and regions ruled by leaders chosen by their people, working for their people, and working for advancement of their region in the modern world. They're committed to Muslim beliefs and traditions, but they seek to join the United States and other non-Muslim countries in reaching toward a freer and better world through the creation of modern democratic governments that work together toward a peaceful world. I believe that we're in a great position to share our democratic government structure with the Middle East. I believe that through modernization and seeing how the rest of the world is, they're ready for a change. They're ready for freedom. They're ready for us and other militaries to leave their countries and to stop our occupation and stop our pressure. They want to learn from us. They want to learn from us, and then they want to rule themselves. I think they're ready to welcome in modernization and welcome it with open arms into their way of life. I think that that's possible to do and still keep their religious beliefs and backgrounds. Christians have been doing it for hundreds of years, and we continue to do it. Why can't Muslims? Granted, their religion is completely different than ours, and they have a different structure, but I think that they can still live hand in hand with modernization and democracy and religious beliefs. I think that they know, especially the newer generations, I think they know without this modernization for their countries, They will continue to live in poverty and fear, and they'll continue to be occupied by stronger powers. They'll continue to be pressured by stronger powers and from outside sources. And without the acceptance of change, there's really no room for growth or advancement in the world theater, and I think that's what they all desire. This advancement is the goal of modernized and fundamentalist Muslims alike. They just aspire to reach it in two very, very different ways. The typical Muslim desires to achieve the goal through peaceful learning of modernized ways, and fundamentalists desire to take the world by force and have every living being converted to Islam, and if not, they're going to continue to fight until they think they've achieved that goal. Not all Muslims are in that fundamentalist mindset. And I read in another text for another class, it said, quote, "Of all non-Western civilizations in the world, Islam offers the best prospects for Western-style democracy," end quote. I don't know if that's true, but looking at it, quite possibly, because they are modernized, they are picking up more modern beliefs and ways, especially, like I said, they're newer generations. So we're there. The United States is there. We're fighting. We're teaching. We're training. We're trying to show them, the democratic ways and different forms and means of government that they can adopt. So we shall see. So I look forward to your responses and interaction with the class. Thanks.